welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
Yes, and how that happens, we are not just we are not picking our favorite events. We are not picking our least favorite events. We have in our employment the randomizer, and the randomizer decides what we'll watch, which could be good, could be bad, but as you always say, Jeremy, it'll be fun.
It's always going to be fun, and it's not just, we're not reviewing weekly TV, we're talking about events, we're talking about pay-per-views, we're talking about classic home videos, we're talking about events like the one we have tonight.
Yes, which is WCW Clash of the Champions 21 from Macon, Georgia, November 17th, 1992. And as a quick aside, Jeremy, the WCW in 1992, very near and dear to my heart, as my first ever live wrestling show was May 3rd, 1992 in Chicago. And I actually attended a WCW house show at the UIC Pavilion just 18 days prior to this Clash of the Champions 21 on Halloween night.
And when we talk about the state of WCW in late 1992, the feeling was that it was, how can we say, lacking direction. Bill Watts, his reign thus far had been considered a failure. Dave Meltzer reports that since the beginning of 1992 through October, this time period here, WCW attendance had dropped 44% at the gate. They've dropped 57%. So attendance has dropped 44%, gates had dropped 57%, and cable television ratings had dropped 33%. This Clash of the Champions show was coming off of one of the worst shows of the year, Halloween Havoc 1992. Angles there didn't make sense. Rude and Chono had a terrible match, if you can believe it. And a snake apparently bit Jake the Snake's face. This
spin the wheel, make the deal. And so you had the spin the wheel, make the deal gimmick, which is not entirely unlike the concept behind this show, meaning this podcast. And of all the options for that main event match, which was Sting versus Jake the Snake Roberts, there was a steel cage match. There was all these different things, a street fight. The wheel landed on a coal miner's glove match.
Ugh, yeah, that leads us into this Clash of the Champions 21. This show was the second lowest rated of the Clash of the Champions shows of all time at this point, and that have aired free on TBS. Out of 7,500 fans in the building, only 700 were paid for a house of $7,000.
That's not good.
No, so that's the state of the business as we roll into this show. And at the introduction of the show, we're told that there's matches in the King of Cable tournament. And
yes, the King of Cable tournament.
I have no memory of this stuff at all. King of Cable
man.
Tournament. And there's a boxing match. Those are never good. Those are always terrible.
Worked pro wrestling boxing matches in the 80s or 90s aren't something you look forward to?
No, this show's going to be this is not great. Like
I'm especially concerned as the randomizer picked this show because I've extolled the virtues of 1992, 1993 WCW to Jeremy for years. Granted, most of the time when I'm extolling said virtues, it's about early 92 when we have, sort of the height of the Dangerous Alliance angle with Paul E managing Rick Rude, Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton, Arn Anderson, and Larry Zbyszko. This show was kind of in the time period where the Dangerous Alliance stable was unraveling. So yeah, this if I was going to pick a show and say, hey, watch that 1992 WCW that I love so much, I probably wouldn't have picked this one. That's yeah, we'll get into it. There's some interesting stuff here.
Yeah, we opened the show with JR and Jesse Ventura. They're your commentary team.
A great duo.
And when Jesse tried, this was a fine duo. We opened with clips from Medusa and Paul E having their weigh-in. They are apparently going to have a fight, a confrontation, a quote match later.
Battle of the Sexes.
The Battle of the Sexes.
Paul E dangerously must have one arm tied behind his back. in
And
theory.
we see Paulie in his green-colored tighty whities to start the show. There's some pull aparts, and then we head to the back where Tony Schiavone is interviewing Executive Vice President of WCW, Cowboy Bill Watts. Nothing really said here.
I literally have on my notes, Watts says nothing.
Nothing. Yes. So,
Which is weird because this is how they would open or near open a lot of shows during the time period of Bill Watts being in charge of WCW. And it was pretty much always this way. It was completely pointless.
so then we cut to a different locker room where we've
Yes.
got Teddy Long and Michael P.S. Hayes. Now, could you have more polar opposites from Schiavone and Watts than Teddy Long and Michael P.S. Hayes? We go to the complete other end of the spectrum, and really, there's again, not much being said until finally we heard something of note. Brian Pillman has a knee injury. He's on crutches, and he's at ringside for Jesse to interview him.
Well, before that, though, I will say that Michael P.S.A.'s did have one great line as they were running down what was going to be happening on the show. And there's a bounty. They talk about a bounty that's on Eric Watts' head for later on in the show. And Michael Hayes says, "Eric, I'd hate you if your last name was Hayes."
That's right. Well, that's right. They said that you just hate Eric Watts because of his last name is Watts, and he's the boss's son. And you're right. He said he'd hate him even if his last name was Hayes. That was a good line. I like Michael P.S. Hayes. I loved him in his role as a manager tonight.
Yes.
He was a fantastic heel manager in the corner of the Dangerous Alliance all night.
Yes. Well, it was a weird time period too. Again, this sort of unraveling of the Dangerous Alliance where they were still technically a group, but they were going off in their own directions. And instead of Paul E managing Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson, you had Michael Hayes managing them, which honestly, as closely as I paid attention to that time period, as much as there are certain shows from 92 that I've gone back and watched from WCW, I had completely forgotten about that arrangement of Michael Hayes managing those guys.
Yeah, and he did a great job. We'll cover that a little bit later. There's plenty of Michael Hayes to come. Jesse's interviewing Brian Pillman at ringside. He is on crutches, and he apologizes to Brad Armstrong because he had apparently attacked Brad Armstrong when he was injured, and
Brad had sort of verbally. Brad had a knee injury. Brad had to vacate the light heavyweight title. Pillman had been kind of teetering on a heel turn and had been saying that Brad Armstrong was chicken, and so then the roles were reversed in theory here, with Pillman claiming that he was injured and could not wrestle Brad Armstrong to start the show, which I was unhappy about because looking at this card, when the randomizer chose the show, I was like, oh man,
this will be a good match.
Yeah, Brad Armstrong, 1992 Brad Armstrong against 1992 Brian Pillman.
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
It was not. It was a Pillman attack, a fake injury, of course. He attacks Armstrong's injured leg with the crutch. Armstrong did a great fighting babyface on one leg kind of attack on Pillman, and it was short-lived. A Pillman chop block leading to a quick victory. Match was over in minutes.
Yeah, so the crowd was very hot for this, whatever they got from this. I will also say that Pillman, this was the earliest stages of really ever seeing Brian Pillman as a heel, and he was great when he before he actually attacks Armstrong. He apologizes and he says, like, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah. He's like, I want you to slap me.
That's right.
Armstrong's like thinking about it. Pillman then sort of turns back and hits him with the crutch.
And Gary Michael Capetta announced that Pillman was the winner, and that got a big cheer for me from my couch because I'm a huge fan of Gary Michael Capetta's work, and that just brings me back into the nostalgia machine for sure. So I was very very excited to hear from him. We get a recap of the Paulie Medusa confrontation, which I needed because I was completely unfamiliar with how we got here. So
yes.
Paulie had fired Medusa at Halloween Havoc,
Yes, so they were sort of co-managers of the Dangerous Alliance. The Dangerous Alliance was Paul E. Dangerously's group. Uh, Initially, Medusa was sort of just managing Rick Rude, but as time went by, on a random TV shows, let's say if you had Steve Austin and Bobby Eaton teaming against Big Josh and Ron Simmons, Medusa would be in their corner, every bit as often as Paul E. And then yeah, things started to slowly sort of fall out, and then we had this confrontation where really when we're talking about all of this with Paul Lee and Medusa, you kind of have to separate out a couple things. First is that Paul E. Dangerously is incredible in this role of being an absolute scumbag, misogynistic pig.
Every promo on these clips was incredible. Absolutely
Oh,
awesome.
unreal. Like Paul Lee at his absolute best. It's also extremely uncomfortable to watch.
It doesn't age well, but no, it
No.
was an amazing performance by
Oh,
Paulie,
for
100%.
sure. And Medusa as well. For someone who
Yes,
hadn't done a ton of, like deep like character work, or just been involved in a storyline quite like this. Like it worked too, because it was, this whole thing of Paul E just being such an absolute just jerk and just demeaning her. But then everyone who's watching knows, because even though she was a manager, they talked about how great of an athlete what she was. I'm like, so you knew that she could beat the hell out of Paulie. So it was an interesting dynamic, given this, the type of dynamic they had set generally with those two.
and we got to see a kickboxing training segment with
Yes.
Medusa. Fun fact: the guy in the outfit sparring with Medusa on that video, Eric Bischoff.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
So Paulie has his public workout with the Dangerous Alliance. This was hilarious.
Oh,
Pa-
so good. So
Paulie,
good.
I don't know who he was in there with, but
Mike Thor.
that's Mike
Remember
Thor.
that name
Okay.
for later.
So Paulie punches him, turns around, cheering and celebrating as Austin actually knocks him out.
Yes.
And
So
then
what?
Paulie jumps on him, pins him, celebrates after. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So the timing of this was perfect. Paulie, hits him, and it just has no effect at all. Mike Thor, who was a WCW jobber extraordinaire at that time, it doesn't take him down at all. Paulie turns around. Uh, then Austin just decks him with the right hand, decks Mike Thor with the right hand. Paulie turns around, sees him down, and just celebrates like he just won the world heavyweight title.
It was great stuff. We got to see Paul cut one of those great promos on Medusa. She ends up chasing him, and in what was the most impressive part of this segment, she jumps the rail in heels and a long
Yes.
dress, and I was like, "Holy cow!" So as they talk about her being an athlete, you just
You
seeing
see
her
it.
do that was super impressive.
Well, that promo though, there's something else great and subtle that happens there. That as Paulie is just being absolutely awful and just saying worse and worse and more demeaning things, slowly each member of the Dangerous Alliance, which again, these are like the most dastardly heels in the company, they even are getting upset with Paul. Like you see Arn Anderson, like, Paul, it's enough. You're going over the line. And each of them sort of walks away and leaves Paul by himself. Paul is talking, about, like, you can't do anything, Medusa, and even if you want to try, I've got all my guys behind me. And then he turns around and none of them are there. He runs away, and as Jeremy just said, Medusa chases him in heels over the rail, and yeah, that's the setup.
We have a match finally. We've got the previously mentioned guy with a bounty on his head, Eric Watts, teaming up with Kenzuki Sasaki to take on
Yes.
Arn Anderson and Beautiful Bobby. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Sasaki, fill us in, Adam.
Well, Kensuke Sasaki, one of the greatest wrestlers in Japanese wrestling history. He was a shorter powerhouse type. If you saw the first WCW New Japan Super Show, you would recognize him teaming with Hiroshi Hase against the Steiner brothers. He was on a learning excursion for New Japan in WCW at the time. They had a very close working relationship and would often send guys, whether it be Keiji Muto as the Great Muta, Jushin Liger went over. In later years, guys like Yuji Nagata, Manabu Nakanishi as Kurosawa would go over and spend a little bit of time, learn a different style and then go back to Japan. this is what was happening for Sasaki at this time. And they had a storyline where Kensuke Sasaki and Masahiro Chono were helping train young Eric Watts, and Masahiro Chono, the master of the STF, the step over toe hold, crossface submission hold, which had been passed down to him by Lou Thez. The idea then was that Masahiro Chono was passing down the STF to Eric Watts, and in this match, Eric Watts and Kensuke Sasaki were teaming. I will say, Jeremy, that this is one of those matches where they talk about Battle Bowl, the Lethal Lottery, a little bit later.
Yep.
To the untrained eye, this sure seems like a Battle Bowl team.
Yeah, I was super excited to see Arn Anderson and Beautiful Bobby together, and this other team, pretty wacky. Let's see how this goes. Of course, Watts is he starts with Eaton, and just clunky series right out of the gates. There was a really bad shoulder blockish takedown thing.
Yes.
I don't know what happened there, but when you're messing up with Bobby Eaton, your future is not bright.
No. And as I was, and I vividly remembered how bad Eric Watts was, but in my notes I wrote, Eric Watts is so clumsy and uncoordinated. Terrible wrestling body also. And then the other thing I noted was that he is the opposite in every way from Dustin Rhodes. You could call him the unnatural.
Yes.
And that really was what they were trying to do. They had such success with a very young Dustin Rhodes, the son, obviously, of Dusty Rhodes. He was great right out of the gate. He was awesome. And clearly the idea here was, push Eric Watts to the moon. But he just when you see him, everything about him screamed not a professional wrestler, yet there he was.
Arn Anderson had his knee taped up pretty heavy in this match.
Yeah.
And
he could barely walk. Like this was Bobby Eaton's match mostly.
Yep. So I looked it up, and Anderson had apparently blown out his knee 2 days earlier at a TV taping when Eric Watts was positioned to the wrong spot, and Arn had to shift in midair to keep from killing him. So he legit blew out his knee, and so he couldn't really work in this match. So that's a little bit of the background. That
explains that. I did want to say, I think this might be what you were talking about, the shoulder block. I have in my notes here that this very bizarre spot where Watts comes off the top rope with what appears, well, there are a couple different things. Watts comes off the top rope, tries a sunset flip, misses. It's very strange. Then Bobby Eaton is going for a side headlock takeover, and Eric Watts, I felt like it was a spear before anyone had done a spear, but it was an accidental spear.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking.
Very weird. And then
being very generous.
And then he gets up and then just falls down.
Yeah, it was.
And then Jesse covers and says that Eric Watts is just way too amped up right now. You don't say.
When we got to see Sasaki in the ring, night and day difference after watching Eric Watts work. When you got to see him in there with Eaton and Anderson, just a solid, just technically solid. Just everything was enjoyable. It was really good. And then unfortunately he had to make the hot tag to Watts, which is the wrong guy on the receiving end of that hot tag. He is so not good. No. Way worse than I'd had in my mind going into this.
Did you also notice there was one point in the match towards the end where I think it was Bobby raked Eric Watts' eyes and Eric just completely no-sold it.
Yeah, luckily it breaks down into a four-way. Ross tells us about the Watts training with Chono, and he catches Eaton with a punch and goes to put him in an STF, and he's sitting there trying to decide which leg to use. The time stood still as he was trying to do it. Then he eventually got it on. Eaton taps to the STF. And,
immediately. And the thing to note, too, is that this was not the first time Eric Watts had done the STF. He had been using this for a little while, and yet he still was not at all certain how to do the maneuver.
Not at all. Johnny B. Bad is boxing Scotty Flamingo in our next match. You might know Scotty Flamingo as Raven.
Yes, and he is playing a character that is decidedly not Raven.
No.
It's basically the same character that he had played in Global Wrestling Federation, which is where he had come from right before WCW. He was Scotty the Body there, and clearly, given that you already had a Jesse the Body Ventura, they went with Scotty Flamingo instead. And as Jeremy said, he was wrestling Johnny B. Bad, who would later go on to be the Wild Man Mark Miro in WWF. The best thing by far about this backstage promo with Tony Schiavone and Teddy Long is Johnny B. Bad's catchphrases, which I had kind of forgotten about. As Tony asks him a question, the first thing he says is, "Oh, hush, Tony." And then he makes sure to end the promo with, "I'm a bad man." He was this gimmick was it was equal parts Little Richard and Muhammad Ali, if you can imagine that.
That doesn't ever look good on paper. I don't know how it got this far, how many meetings that got through, but they did show a clip leading up to this where Flamingo punched Bad because he put the glitter lip sticker on his cheek, and
yes.
and I
you don't do that.
I vaguely remember that as a thing that Johnny B. Bad did.
Oh yeah. Well, because Johnny B. Bad when he first came into WCW, I believe in late '91, he was a heel managed by Teddy Long. And then he eventually morphed into a baby face. We could talk more about this promo, but Jeremy, there's nothing I am more excited about talking about on this week's show than what happened next, which was Tony Schiavone with Scotty Flamingo, Diamond Dallas Page, and Vinny Vegas, along with a Don King lookalike.
Yes.
This interview took place backstage in the other locker room area. Vinny Vegas, for those of you that don't know, would go on to leave WCW and become Diesel, and then obviously Kevin Nash later in the NWO. There are a lot of things we could talk about with this backstage segment, but the promo that Vinny Vegas attempted, and attempt is the operative word here.
We have a lot to unpack here.
Yes. There is a lot happening in this short amount of time.
Let's start with this accent. What is this terrible accent that Diesel's trying to do, that Nash is trying to do here? Is this supposed to be Italian? Is it supposed to be what New Jersey? What is this accent? I don't get it.
It's Vegas by
Vegas
way
doesn't
of,
have
I know.
It doesn't have an accent like that.
That's where the humor lies with this. That it is he is trying to do something that I think he thinks is what people from the East Coast that go to Las Vegas sound like.
Wow.
But it is, you have to watch this show if for no other reason than to hear what his voice sounds like, because we can't possibly do it justice.
And then he goes on to mention the Sands, then corrects himself to Caesar's Palace, does a legit facepalm, and
he can't remember any other casino. He is Vinny Vegas. His entire gimmick is gambling, rolling dice, playing the odds. He knows one, maybe two casinos.
He just apologizes because he's very excited, and he keeps tripping over his words in this terrible promo.
And it keeps going on and on and on. And then you're just looking there and thinking, even though this is years before either guy went on to real stardom, you're seeing Vinny Vegas just dying 1,000 deaths cutting this promo. And he has DDP, a very good promo guy, and the future Raven, one of the best promo guys of all time, right there next to him. But he can't help but try to dig himself out of this hole.
This was brutal. I didn't pick up on the spiky haired guy being a Don King lookalike. Maybe because I was
absolutely.
Jesse mentions it later on commentary, and then I'm like, oh, okay. I was just so distracted by the Vinny Vegas promo. Yeah. I think I didn't give it its proper attention.
Well, and Don King, quote unquote, he has his back to the camera the whole time because it's obviously not Don King, and so they don't want it to be that obvious. But yeah, DDP is early DDP. Fun fact, my first ever wrestling match that I saw live, Jeremy, at that WCW house show on May 3rd, I won't say young because he was already old at that point, but young in his career and not very good at all, DDP versus Michael P.S. Hayes.
Wow.
That was my introduction to live professional wrestling.
I'm glad you stuck with it. We've got We've got rules in this boxing match: 3 2-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest period between the rounds. The Vegas connection at ringside, because Johnny B. Bad was a 75-1 favorite, so the Vegas connection all had money on this fight.
Well, not only were they ringside, we had a Vegas connection Gracie train on the way out.
We did. Yes.
This was actually, in a lot of ways, the Gracie train should be renamed for the Vegas connection, because this was, well, at least before we ever saw it in the U.S., this predated that. So that was quite the thing.
In the match, jabs knocking Flamingo out of the ring, quickly outboxed, outclassed. You were told a few times about Johnny B. Bad's Golden Gloves history. So
JR was very excited to get into that. That was like the one real sports thing he could slip into this just complete debacle.
And the debacle happens when Vinny Vegas on the apron distracts the referee, so Scotty could rake the eyes while he's wearing boxing gloves.
Yes. Well, it was the sweat on the gloves. He rubbed the sweat into the eyes of Johnny B. Bad.
And then clotheslined him, lays the boots to him. Horrible punches by Flamingo. Bad ends up knocking him down. Flamingo gets saved by the bell. There was you could be saved by the bell in WCW. So they took Flamingo to the corner, and between rounds, DDP was filling the glove of Flamingo with water.
Yes, so it's like a cinder block attached to his hand.
So this is all right, and then Page distracts Bad in round 2, and the water-loaded punch ends up knocking out Johnny B. Bad. And so he gets knocked out. He can't answer the 10 count. And they announce the winner by TKO, Scotty Flamingo, in round 2. This was horrible.
It was bad. I will say that there are some great pro wrestling moments in the terrible boxing. I liked the filling the glove with water. I will also say that Scotty Flamingo's gear, his entrance gear, which was special for this event, I believe on the back of his jacket, it said something like Scotty One Punch Bingo Flamingo, which just filled my heart with joy. And again, when you're watching this, you can derive so much more enjoyment out of it as you're watching Scotty Flamingo and realizing that this man would be Raven in just a few short years.
Sure, I'd like to think that it fed into the Raven origin story.
There you go. There you go. This led into Scotty Polo and then Raven, absolutely.
We got like you mentioned earlier, we had a special feature on Starrcade 92 Battle Bowl. I had never seen a Battle Bowl, and so I was getting caught up on the rules here. The 2 teams will be drawn now, and those Missy Hyatt, Be Still My Heart, and Jesse Ventura drew the names. It ended up being Cactus Jack and Johnny B. Bad. They will be a team, and they will take on Danny Spivey and Van Hammer. They'll be the other team.
That was your hook to order Starrcade 92 early.
Buy now.
Please. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to beg the randomizer to not select this show ever.
Oh, select it. And select Starrcade 91. The first Battle Bowl was actually pretty good.
They showed highlights of the first Battle Bowl with the Sting and Abdullah the Butcher.
Yes. Vader came down to see. Yeah, it was fun as a concept. It obviously, it didn't last very long. But yeah, this whole, I mean, again, in my notes, there are a lot of video features on this show, which is 100% true. This was one of the more oddly paced shows, Clash of the Champions or otherwise, that I've ever watched, particularly because WCW is usually more of the all action company of the two. But there was just a lot of wackiness on this show. And one of the things, well, this reoccurred throughout. After we had this Starrcade 92 preview, the Battle Bowl preview, that then floated us to a commercial break, and we had a promo of Slam Jam.
Slam Jam 1 is out.
Yes. A great album that unfortunately I do not have anymore, but there were,
You
great
had this
songs like,
album?
oh, hell yeah.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
want to hear this album now. I was
I,
so excited after hearing little clips of these songs. I'm like, I was immediately Googling around trying to find Slam Jam
it's,
1.
it's amazing. I mean, songs like They Call Him the Natural, for Dustin Rhodes. There was a Barry Windham song with a great line. He's smoking. I ain't joking. He's Barry Windham.
Oh, good
This
stuff.
was, A Man Called Sting came from this fine music release. So yeah, if you can ever get your hands on it, do not
Oh,
let it slip from your grasp like
I
I did.
will. I am actively working to track down Slam Jam 1. All right, we've got
We'll have to do a review of Slam Jam 1, by the way.
can do.
A special edition of the show.
So Ron Simmons and some guy were going to take on Cactus Jack the Barbarian and Tony Atlas.
In something that they called, and I quote, a ghetto odds match.
3-on-2. I thought we were still talking Battle Bowl when I saw this team of Cactus Jack, the Barbarian, and Tony Atlas. I didn't know what was going on. Apparently, Ron Simmons' partner was supposed to be Ronnie Walker. This match was supposed to be Ronnie Walker and Ron Simmons against these three
Robbie
guys.
Walker. Hard work,
Robbie.
Bobby Walker.
Okay. Walker was...
And there's a whole thing that you can Google on what happened to Walker. We won't get into it here, but yes,
he was fired 1 week before this clash.
Yes,
and so Simmons is apparently the world champion right now. I didn't see a belt.
He did not have the belt with him, but this was just prior. So he goes into Starrcade '92 and defends against Dr. Death Steve Williams, and then shortly thereafter loses the title at the Omni. I believe it was at the Omni to Vader in a non-televised show.
Simmons, I loved late 80s, early 90s Ron Simmons. And
he's great.
He's so great. And I love him. I don't know about him as a world champion in this promotion with the people in charge of this promotion at that time. Probably was never going to be successful, but I was a big fan of Ron Simmons. He didn't really get to show much here in this match. This was more of a showcase for his random no-name partner that Jesse and JR could not identify, had no idea who he was. The Barbarian ended up accidentally booting his partner, and then we got to see the guy come off the top. He does his flip, pins Atlas for the win, and it turns out we are introduced to him in a post-match interview, and he is Too Cold Scorpio.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. Too Cold Scorpio, again, as you said, this was his debut in WCW.
Super green, but very flashy for WCW.
Oh, yeah. What he did well, he did very well. The match starts with a huge no-hands tope over the top rope from Too Cold Scorpio. He also, there was one point where he missed a moonsault, but recovered nicely and caught, I believe, the Barbarian with a kick. But yeah, the 450 off the top. The crowd absolutely loves Scorpio, and you have never heard Jim Ross be more impressed by one man doing one move in your life than Jim Ross's reaction to this 450 off the top from Too Cold Scorpio. He just, I have written down here, JR loses his mind. The crowd loses their minds. A superstar is made, which it should have been, but because it was WCW, they kind of only went halfway with Scorpio. But he looked great. I will say that his strength was clearly in the ring at that point, because the post-match promo was... It was like he was floundering, and then he was saying stuff, and then Jesse's like, thanks, we gotta go.
And I'm glad we went, because we got what was the highlight of the first half of this show for me, a Z-Man and Johnny Gunn video package. Where
oh, yes, we did.
Johnny Gunn, who you might know as Tom Brandy, he... and Z-Man were in this montage of mullets and bangs that were buying clothes. So there's just Women with giant bangs, these dudes with giant mullets, and they're clothes shopping.
Yes, at a upscale men's clothing store. The best, I won't say the best part of this because there's so many great things, but I think
There's
my favorite part is that they enter this men's clothing store and there's like five women that help them out. But when they arrive, these women just happen to all be reading copies of WCW
of
magazine.
course there. That's good stuff.
This was mid '80s Rock and Roll Express promo video brought to life in 1992. I also feel like this might be, even though the wrestlers are different, this feels like the prototype for the American Males promo videos on Nitro a couple years later.
Apparently, Z-Man and Gunn hook up with some of the store employees in the
Yes.
fitting rooms.
Yes. And then they all just quit their jobs and leave
And
with,
leave.
quote,
We're done.
the new hottest tag team.
It was a giant graphic telling us that they are the hottest new tag team. I'm sold.
Unbelievable.
What a
And then,
video
of course,
package that was.
Of course, then they went on to do approximately nothing as a tag team.
Sure, yeah. And that led us into more nothing with a strongest arm contest that's in full swing. We get a recap of an arm wrestling tournament. Pass.
Yes,
this is so boring.
It was terrible. And I vividly remember hating this as a kid. This was one of the things when Jesse the Body Ventura came in, his thing, yeah, the Jesse the Body, whatever, international invitational arm wrestling tournament. It was on WCW Worldwide every week, and it was as bad as you would imagine.
Ron Simmons beat Steve Austin, the Barbarian beat Arn Anderson, and if you tune into Worldwide, you can see Vinny Vegas take on Van Hammer in an arm wrestling competition. I almost quit watching wrestling right now
Yes.
based on that promo.
Yes, and this tournament, if my memory serves me right, this tournament, if you can call it that, it was built around sort of building up Van Hammer.
So we're halfway through this show. How much wrestling do you think we've seen so far, Adam?
I couldn't venture a guess, but I would imagine that it's got to be around Vince Russo TNA Impact levels of wrestling to not wrestling.
I went and pulled the timings because I had to know. We are at 12 minutes and 23 seconds of wrestling so far on this Clash of the Champions, and we're halfway through. This show needed to be saved in a bad way, and I was struggling. We've got the Paul E segment here with Medusa. Now, this is the match that they've been building to through all the video packages, all this stuff. This confrontation was supposed to be big. Paul E's introduced. A tale of the tape graphic is shown.
Well, first though, Jeremy, there's another Paul E promo.
It was a fantastic. He has headgear on. He did a great promo.
Yes, we had another Paul E Dangerously promo with Michael Hayes. He's wearing his headgear, and they mentioned something about Mike Thor and how, don't bother paying him. Don't bother paying him. So keep that in mind. Mike Thor, again, the jobber early on that we talked about in the Paul E training video.
So Medusa's introduced, and we get a camera angle that shoots differently than anybody else had come out to. We get an angle from behind of the entrance of Medusa coming out, but you can clearly see that this is not Medusa. This is a big dude coming out with a long ponytail. And then we get a tale of the tape graphic for Medusa as she's entering the ring, quote, she's entering the ring, and Paulie knocks her out right away with the phone. Now, we don't see any of this. We hear Ross explaining it because all we're seeing is the graphic for the tale of the tape.
Yes.
So the graphic goes away, and then Medusa, quote unquote, is down in the ring. This was all horrible.
Yes, this was not the finest moment of Craig Leathers and company, the WCW production team. It was not. It didn't work out as planned. A few other amusing notes to me, Jeremy, before we get into the match, such as it is. First off, if you're not familiar with Paulie Dangerously during that time, he was nicknamed the Psycho Yuppie, which was fantastic. And then Jim Ross described it as Paulie was entering the ring. He described Paul E's body type as, quote, proportionate.
Yes.
And I just about died. I was howling with laughter. Just the way Jim Ross said that.
No, this is peak Jim Ross today. He was on fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I could only assume that we were supposed to get the graphic when Medusa was coming out to the ring.
Yes.
And then the graphic would go away as Paulie hits her with the phone. That would be, I assume that's what was scripted, but we actually saw the opposite. So
yes,
the complete effect was ruined. This had to be a mistake. We didn't see the phone shot. Hayes proclaims Paulie the winner, and then Paulie says he wants a kiss from Medusa, goes down, the wig comes off, and you see it's Mike Thor and not Medusa.
See that, even though they screwed up the actual him hitting Medusa at the phone, like that was another great classic pro wrestling moment.
And then the real Medusa comes in, kicking Paulie, and he doesn't have one hand tied behind his back. She's fighting him fair. She
hits him with a giant like Mirko Krokop head kick, and I'm thinking like that's it, it's over. She knocks him out. She gets her revenge. It's perfect. That isn't exactly how it went.
No. I mean, she picked him up. She slams him.
Yes.
But the place was going wild. The place was going nuts for Medusa. And Paulie tries to run away. Medusa physically carries him from the back locker room area back to the ring, which is pretty impressive. And then Hayes ends up tripping Medusa. And she ends up selling an axe handle like off the top from Paulie. So Paulie coming off the top rope, she no-sells it, she dominates, and then in a weird ending to this, she tries to pull his pants off, but he's wearing like a full sweatsuit underneath like a full jersey, and then he takes
looked
off
like
the jersey.
He was basically going to be like doing a UFC sauna weight cut where you wear like a full sweatsuit under that, and then like trash bags over it. That's pretty much what was going on.
Yeah, she pulls his jersey pants off, leaving on like, the sweatsuit, and Paulie runs away again. Probably not the effect either that they thought that was going to have. Embarrassing Paulie. It didn't really come off that way. It was kind of flat at the end there. But
the other thing we didn't mention is there's the 5-minute time limit, and so Paulie runs away, the time limit runs out, and then just the match is over. And so it was unsatisfying in that the whole build to this was Paulie being horrible and misogynistic and humiliating Medusa, and that she was any logical booking of this would have been that she gets like full ultimate revenge, gets takes him out, and instead it's just she survived 5 minutes with him. Like it was not the ideal finish.
No. Medusa lasts the 5 minutes, and this fun fact was Paulie's last appearance on WCW television.
Wow.
We roll into the King of Cable tournament.
Not before another Slam Jam promo, though.
Oh, no, they kept coming, and I kept wanting more. Give me more. Open up these veins. Give me some Slam Jam.
They could have just really replaced the first hour of the show with a Slam Jam album release listening party.
Yes,
and
please.
it, improved for sure.
Apparently, this tournament was to celebrate 20 years on TBS. That's what this tournament was. A 16-man single elimination tournament.
Well, no, not exactly. This was a WCW and WCW magazine co-promoted tournament where they selected 15 names. Then there was a random draw.
We love randomness here on the podcast.
Exactly. A random podcast with them previewing a random tag team pay-per-view and also telling us about the random draw tournament. But yes, 15 men selected, a random draw for 8 names from those 15, and then those 8 men comprised the King of Cable tournament, which as they laid out coming into this, Rick Rude defeated Was it Rick Rude defeated Barry Windham
Rick
and
Rude
Sting
defeated
defeated
Wyndham
Brian
by
Pillman?
cheating.
Yes.
He cheated to advance. Sting beat Pillman. We didn't get to see any highlights of that. Atlas beat Vader. I'm sorry, Atlas and Vader. Vader
Jesus,
wins.
do not. Yeah,
Sorry,
no. WCW had bad moments back then, but
not
not
that
that
bad.
bad.
No,
If
Vader
Tony
won.
Atlas had beaten Vader,
Cactus beat. He beat up Dustin Rhodes before the match, but Dustin overcame the odds and defeated the Barbarian, who was a sub for Jake the Snake Roberts, who
Yes.
had gone to rehab. So
Yes.
he had gone to rehab, Barbarian subbed, and Dustin Rhodes advances. So we've got Sting and Rude tonight in this on this show, and then we've got Vader and Dustin Rhodes. That'll take place on the next WCW Saturday night.
Yes. And before we get to Rude and Sting, though, we have another backstage interview. It is Big Van Vader with Harley Race.
Harley Race, yeah.
And the other noteworthy thing is it's not only Big Van Vader, it's Vader and his do-rag. I had completely forgotten that this was the do-rag era of Vader in backstage promos and pre-match. He had long gotten rid of his awesome, crazy headgear that he would wear out that would smoke and sometimes blind his opponents. And he was also not wearing the full mask by this time.
This is a 20-minute time limit, and so they have 3 judges at ringside to ensure we have a winner. So if you were wondering if maybe this would go the time limit, here's what we call a tell. We've got 3 judges: Ole Anderson, Hiro Matsuda, and Larry Zbyszko.
All 3 men, by the way, who had been dastardly heels in WCW and not that recent past. Ole Anderson was, by this point, he was the troubleshooting referee for Bill Watts. He was the senior official. I have terrible memories of seeing Ole Anderson referee matches here or there on those WCW house shows in '92 that I went to. The worst count you've ever seen. Then you also had Hiro Matsuda, who, if you remember, in '89, sort of as the Horsemen were coming apart, he was managing Ric Flair. And then obviously Larry Zbyszko, the stall master himself. So it was an interesting choice for the 3 judges at ringside, which the announcers actually even kind of pointed out. Both Jim Ross, I think JR or Jesse Ventura pointed out, and Jim Ross agreed completely that these might not be the most trustworthy judges.
No, and they were not. Winner gets a big trophy. Finals at Starrcade '92. So Rude is the U.S. champion at this time. He comes out. What was his theme song in WCW? Because I feel like this was a WWE Network overdub generic music that I was hearing.
I mean, there was no music at this point. I mean, it was very I don't know how to describe it. It was very what you would expect from Rick Rude. It definitely lent itself to the hip swiveling after calling people out of shape inner city sweat hogs. Although I believe on this show he called the fans, quote, out of shape, Sting loving sleazebags.
Sting loving sleazebags, yes.
Rick Rude, by the way, also sans mustache.
Yeah, no mustache in this one at all. No. Sting comes out. He's popular. Holy cow. People love Sting. And this match, I highly enjoyed this match. These guys worked. Great. They worked real. It was like a methodical pace. Everything was real deliberate. Everything was so
mattered.
Good. Everything mattered. It was Rude working over Sting's back, and you've got Sting working over Rude's ribs. And
well, yes, but the other thing to me that's noteworthy about this is that it's not the normal conventions of heel face dynamic in a match like this, particularly back in this time frame. The match starts, and it is, I would say, probably the first 7 or 8 minutes are Sting in control, Sting working over Rick Rude's ribs, just really, really taking it to him. And it's, with interesting different moves, a front face suplex from Sting, which we don't see that often, a pop-up stomach breaker. A very, very unique spot that I don't think I've ever seen before, where Rude he's on the apron outside of the ring. His back is to the ropes. He's tied up in the in between the top rope and the second rope. And Sting uses the apron several times to sort of pop up and swivel.
Sting is
And
outside the ring. He's standing
yes,
on the floor
yes,
and jumping up.
exactly.
Yeah.
And with these jumping sidekicks to Rude's ribs, like that was one of the things that I love about Sting, is that in big matches he would always bust out different, unique stuff. The Rude feud, the Vader feud, very similar. These two guys just, it doesn't necessarily get talked about as much because their feud was always at the U.S. title level for the most part, so they didn't get to go on last a lot. I'm not saying these guys were Flair or Steamboat, but these guys they had chemistry together that, they were, if not each other's best opponents, pretty damn close. And this match, it definitely it didn't stray from that. And it had a very unique layout that if you haven't seen it before, that alone on top of the work, just the layout of it itself to me is worth your time.
Yeah, it was really great. Rude is great. And Sting was great at being Sting, like you mentioned. Big match Sting trying to deliver. Fantastic. 5 minutes remaining. We got a clock. We got a clock graphic.
Yes.
And it starts counting down. We've got about 3.5 minutes to go. We're in a bear hug spot. We've got a 2-minute warning, and then with 2 minutes to go, they really cranked it up, and we had the final minute was Sting on top with a crossbody 2.5. Place was going nuts. It was hard to tell because Nick Patrick counts weird. I'm not a huge fan.
Well, when he goes down to the mat on his left shoulder and then counts with his right hand. But there's several times throughout any show with him where when he hits the mat, it sounds like it's count one.
Exactly.
And so you catch yourself thinking, oh my God, is that 3? But it's not.
And the people thought about that too on that spot.
Yes.
So you got Sting comes off the top. Rude catches him with a fist in the abdomen and then goes for the Rude Awakening with 10 seconds left. But his ribs are hurt too badly, and he can't pull it off. Sting counter, Stinger splash. Attempts to go for a Scorpion Deathlock, but the clock expires. And that's how the match ends. We head to the judges.
Notes before we get to the judges. I just want to mention the Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura were incredible in this match. For one, like Jim Ross in 91, 92, to me, that was the best he's ever been. And he had something he could really sink his teeth into here. But just the little things that they were pointing out, Sting working over the Rude's midsection, Ventura saying it might not be the best strategy because Rude's got, abs of steel, basically. Talking about, both of them talking about how the judge's presence might alter the strategy of both wrestlers. Talking about it putting the wrestlers in a difficult spot, though, because they don't know what type of offense will impress the judges, which is crazy to think about because, like, you hear that and that's like UFC stuff nowadays, where what's going to work better, what's going to impress a judge better, takedown or, striking. So just really very, very impressed by both of them on this match.
It was great. We go to the judges. Split decision is announced.
Shocking.
Matsuda scores it for Sting. We don't know what the score was, or
this was early UFC as well, where Dave Meltzer just holds up a card that says the winner.
Yes, and so Zbyszko scores it for Rude. So the deciding vote is Ole Anderson, who scores it for Sting.
Which is shocking because you're thinking Ole Anderson.
He's not.
Ole Anderson's the guy who engineered the Horseman turn on Sting. There's no way he's gonna rule that Sting won, and yet he did.
Sting advances in the tournament. Rude tried to cheap shot him after the announcement, but Sting counter with another atomic drop, and nobody sells an atomic drop better than Rick Rude.
Because you have the regular atomic drop and the inverted atomic drop. That combination always works. The other thing I wrote down is just that you have never seen human beings so happy in your life as the people in that building were when Sting was announced the winner. And then just everything. Sting was just overjoyed to win. Rude was just heartbroken. Like, I can't do justice to how great Rick Rude was.
So good.
every single moment of this match. Great on offense, incredible selling his ribs throughout this match, and keeping that going throughout the 20 minutes. And then the sort of the progress of his emotions immediately after. First, he's just so upset, so heartbroken, but then because he's Rick Rude, he's a dastardly evil heel. He's got to go try to take out Sting. But you also have just a little extra, to me, added, I don't know, realism, or just a really nice little touch that the second the match was over, you had a bunch of referees jump in the ring to try to hold Rude back because they knew that he would try to cheap shot Sting.
It's main event.
And then Jesse says it's a hometown call, which I just thought was perfect. Like, after all that, it just totally blew it off.
It's main event time. I'm hoping if this match can deliver, then this show is saved for me after that Rude Sting match. We've got the unified World Tag Team Championships on the line. Challengers, Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. They come out first. Douglas wearing a white leather jacket that had a ton of tassels and giant slots with like missing pieces of jacket. You could see almost his entire back and ribs. And so I assume you could only wear this jacket to the ring in a wrestling match. It would serve no purpose in real life.
It would not keep you warm, this jacket.
No. And so the Unified World Tag Team Champs, Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes, come out. We don't have time to go into what the heck this Unified World Tag Team Championship is. What's the difference between NWA and WCW? We'll save that for another show.
Yes. I will say very quickly, Jeremy, in the entrance, if you were a fan of wrestling in the 80s and early to mid 90s, if there was a baby face and they were starting to grow a beard, it was time to worry about what their true intentions were. And I'll just say Barry Windham had the makings of a beard walking down to the ring.
That he did. And we've got a babyface versus babyface match here.
Yes.
So the crowd had just seen Sting. And so they were kind of, I'd say, quiet for
I don't think
the
they didn't know what to make
match.
of it.
Yeah, babyface match, and they didn't know
exactly
who to cheer
after
for.
a whole show of heels and baby faces. And again, like you said, they had Rude and Sting, with Sting winning, so they got their big moment. And then here you just had four really good wrestlers that they liked, and so they didn't really know what to do. Jesse Ventura knew what to do. He was salivating, drooling over the possibility of baby faces. Good
cheating.
Guys.
Someone's going to cheat.
Frustrated. Someone's going to cheat. Someone's going to take the first shot. He said this multiple times.
And he was wrong for a while. We had a lot of, clean breaks and good chain wrestling. And, it was real good stuff. Steamboat and Windham got in there together, and you could see Windham was super aggressive, and then which made Steamboat get aggressive, and it was a real good back and forth. They had a good chop battle. It was real exciting. We had quick tags with Steamboat and Douglas, and the challengers hitting all their double team offense on Windham, and we saw just Douglas missing a crossbody and whiplashing himself, clotheslining himself on that top rope. Just brutal. That was one of the most brutal spots of the show. And then
this match, the pace, it's sort of what you touched on. They worked from go at a very, very high pace, whether it was the quick tags in and out, arm drags being exchanged, striking exchanges. This was particularly for this time period. This was just a breakneck speed. Yeah, and it
gave the champs to take over after that Douglas clothesline, and you got to see one of the spots that I loved. Steamboat leaves his corner to come to the other side of the ring to beat on the apron to try to fire up Douglas.
Oh yeah,
I'm like as a kid, Ricky Steamboat was like one of my favorites. He was just like the best babyface ever, and it was so great. And
get yourself someone in life who cheerleads for you, like Ricky Steamboat cheerleads for Shane Douglas here.
Yes, please. It was a great match so far, but the crowd was quiet. Hot tag to Steamboat, and Steamboat does this thing where he does 3 drop downs, goes for a leapfrog, and Dustin Rhodes inadvertently headbutts him low. So gets him in the groin, as Ventura reports. So a low blow, inadvertent, and Rhodes is checking on Steamboat, who is just writhing in pain. He's down after the low blow. Rhodes is concerned. Wyndham is losing his mind on the apron, demanding that he pin him.
Yes, Barry is just, he cannot fathom that Dustin Rhodes has, whether it was intentional or not, that he has Ricky Steamboat down and out. And clearly, if he covers him, there's no way Steamboat is going to kick out. And Dustin, not only does he not go for the pin, he's consoling Ricky Steamboat and checking on him, asking him how he is, which the commentary did a very good job earlier in the match of pointing out that Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes, great friends, former tag team champions. They won the tag team titles at a Clash of the Champions the year prior. And so there was clearly some camaraderie here.
Jim Ross, and that is huge because, again, I have no context going into this match. So Jim Ross was there to catch me up and gave me that key piece of information, and that made this make a lot more sense. And so that was super helpful to me.
Barry tags in and immediately drops an elbow.
No. Wyndham has enough and tags himself in.
Well, yes. That's what I mean. He tags in, meaning he tags himself in aggressively. Dustin's not happy about it. He comes in, drops the elbow. Ricky Steamboat kicks out. Jesse Ventura, not surprisingly, agrees with Barry Windham in terms of thinking that Dustin Rhodes is out of his mind for not following up here. And then Windham doubles down on this and hits Ricky Steamboat with an inverted atomic drop. And Ricky Steamboat is every bit the inverted atomic drop seller that Rick Rude is, as we mentioned earlier, just completely just in total agony. Then Barry turns to Dustin and is berating him still, just reading him the riot act, like, this is what you do, this is what you do. Hits him with another inverted atomic drop.
Keeps going for the inverted atomic drop.
Yes, working over the injured nether regions of one Ricky Steamboat, and then catches him with a huge flying lariat. Goes for the cover. Barry goes for the cover. Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham's tag team championship partner, comes in and makes the save for his opponent.
Pulls him off.
Pulling Barry Windham off. This, that's quite the moment in pro wrestling right there. You don't see that very often. And from there, we get what you would expect. Barry pushes Dustin. Dustin immediately slaps Barry.
Slaps him, yes.
Which is like quite the escalation from young babyface Dustin Rhodes here.
Barry slaps him right back.
Yes, Barry slaps him back. And then Dustin punches Barry. Just waylays him.
He punches his partner.
Yes, punches his partner. The babyface punches his partner. Shane Douglas tags Ricky Steamboat, comes in, immediately hits the belly-to-belly suplex, gets the win. You have new tag team champions.
Pins Wyndham, new unified tag team champions.
And Dustin, it was great because afterwards, Dustin immediately is like snapped out of his youthful, anger, and is just holding his head and just can't believe. Like, he immediately realizes what he's done, what he's cost him and his partner and mentor, Barry Windham. But Dustin, instead of going and apologizing to Barry right away, Dustin goes to check on Ricky Steamboat.
Yep, goes to
in
the locker
the champion's corner. He goes to the corner. He goes to the corner and checks on Ricky Steamboat. And Barry Windham is just dumbfounded. And you could just see he is boiling over with anger. And then Dustin just leaves. Dustin Rhodes, the babyface who just cost his team the tag team championships, leaves. And then we get a moment where Barry Windham, who, again, I don't know how much people have listened to my other podcasts or not. I adore Barry Windham. I love Barry Windham. I think he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And Barry was he was great the whole match, but from this moment on through the show and off the air, he was just incredible. He's standing on the bottom rope, just screaming at Dustin, Dustin. Finally, Dustin comes back, starts apologizing.
He's trying to explain what happened.
Exactly. And Jim Ross again, he's so good here. He's just a god among men as an announcer. Jim Ross is like, yeah, he's like, they'll get a rematch. It'll be okay. Uh, Barry turns his back, kind of sideways, turns his back to Dustin Rhodes, and you see the camera shot of Barry just sneering. Like you can see the like going from anger to like, I have an idea. I am plotting. And he turns and sort of side kicks Dustin Rhodes in the stomach and then just hits him with a huge DDT. Randy Anderson, the referee, tries to break it up. Barry Windham shoves him, and Randy Anderson, he pretty much created 10 years earlier the cell of Monty Brown's pounce here. He just got launched. And then Barry just continues the attack. Hits Dustin with a huge superplex.
He spits on Dustin.
Yes,
hits him with the superplex.
Superplex, just mounted punches, beats the hell out of him. And another great little moment here is as this is going on, we see Jesse Ventura go running to the locker room because Jesse's got to go interview the new tag team champions.
Yeah, they weren't expecting this after match thing. They weren't expecting to have to cover the after match beatdown of Dustin Rhodes here. So Jesse has to hustle to get to the back to interview the new champs.
Yes, and then we go to a commercial break. We come back, and Jesse Ventura is interviewing Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes. And, they're talking about, how great it is. They're the tag team champions. And then out of nowhere, Barry Windham comes into the locker room and just absolutely waffles Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas with chairs.
This attack was awesome. This was so amazing. Awesome.
It was everything. Like, if you are upset in modern wrestling about there not being enough like hatred and vitriol in, like actual blood feuds, this is for you. Barry is just enraged. Like I said, chair shots, bounces each of their heads off lockers. He's screaming, "You're going to pay it," both of them. The officials, referees come in to try to break it up. And then we go back to Jim Ross at the desk, basically saying, "We got to go."
Yeah.
And we're out of time. And then, credits roll, and that's that.
And this was the last Clash of the Champions that would be announced by Jim Ross. He would head to WWF in early 1993.
Yes. So. Actual thing to note as well that the WCW Japan Super Show, I believe it was what would have been the third one by that point in 1993. They filmed that show. And Jim Ross, if I'm not mistaken, does announcing on some of the matches. There was a match that was supposed to be a main event that the Steiner brothers were going to be in, but they had left WCW to go to WWF. And so they pulled that match off the broadcast. They added a different match in, and Eric Bischoff had to do announcing for that one match and said something about like Jim Ross had to leave for this match, but he'll be right back. And then Jim Ross called, I think it was Sting and Hiroshi Hase in the main event. But yeah, this was the end of Jim Ross.
All right, best match on the show for you. Is it what is it? I'm gonna go with the tag team championship match because the Wyndham turn was so awesome, and I'm gonna include the post match attack. And the last two matches made the show for me. Either one of those two matches are worth going out of your way to see. But yeah, I'm going with the tag match. How about you?
It's tough. I agree with you that the last 5 minutes of this show, Barry Windham's performance in the last 5 minutes of the show might have been the best thing on the show, but I can't in good conscience not say Sting versus Rick Rude because
that's fair. It was so good.
Madly in love with that match. I love that combination. And like I said, I love that they turned a lot of the normal conventions of heel versus babyface during that era completely on its head. And that they actually worked it was one of the few times that I felt like having three judges and doing that, it actually had a satisfying finish. So to me, that match, what it was, who was in it, the context, it was pretty much a perfect match.
Worst match for you?
Oh, God. Oh, man. I would say... you go first. Let me think, because
It's the
there's
boxing
definitely
match. I have no. There's nothing redeeming about the boxing match. I can't. No, hard no. I mean the Medusa and Paulie was bad, but it had moments of good. I couldn't pick any real moments of good out of the boxing match.
I actually have to go with the Eric Watts tag team match, because if you were going to tell me that there's a tag team match that has Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, and Kensuke Sasaki, and
It would not be good.
and you would tell me that I would hate it, I would not believe you. But I absolutely hated this match, because if we're counting full segments here, I derived so much joy out of the Vinny Vegas botched promo that I can't possibly say that anything that was attached to that was the worst thing on the show.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Reminder, every Thursday we will post on social media what event that week's episode will cover. So make sure that you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at WrestleAtRandom. Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom as well. And WrestlingAtRandom.com is the website that has the entire back catalog of this podcast. All links to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, rate, review, help others find this show. Tell your wrestling fan friends about us. Tell your lapsed fan friends about us. They haven't watched wrestling in a while. That's okay. We're going back in the time machine. We're reviewing old stuff. So tell them to give us a try. Take a trip down memory lane with us.
Tell your friends who, for some reason, will only listen to podcasts by watching them on YouTube. You can even find us there.
That's right. We've launched. We also will post these podcasts on YouTube. So anywhere, any way you consume podcasts, we are up and running, and we are there. All those links again at WrestlingAtRandom.com. And with that, we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.